change my camera out. So
cool. So after some technical glitches, I think we're actually here and we're live. Today on Conversations with Dr. Wes, I'm honored to welcome Robert W. Poynter III, aka Bob Poynter, to the show. Bob is a licensed professional counselor based here in Georgia with nearly 2 decades of clinical experience, and he brings a deeply holistic and integrative lens to the healing process. His work weaves together psychology, neuroscience, mindfulness, breathwork, trauma recovery, somatic practices, polyvagal theory, clinical hypnotherapy, and contemplative traditions from both Eastern and Western approaches. What I appreciate about Bob's work is that it's grounded not only in clinical knowledge, but also in presence. He speaks about healing as a whole person process, mind, body, emotion, and spirit, and about helping people release old patterns, reconnect with themselves, and move towards deeper authenticity and alignment. Bob holds his MS and EDS in professional counseling from Georgia State University and a BA in psychology from Augusta State University. He's also a nationally board certified counselor and certified clinical hypnotherapist. In addition to his clinical work, he's known for creating a warm and grounded therapeutic space where people feel deeply seen, supported, and invited into meaningful transformation. Bob, welcome to Conversations with Dr. Wes. I'm grateful to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Wes. It's great to be here. What a great intro. Thank you. You've done some research on me.
Yeah, brother. Well, and you and I met. I'll just start with we had known about one another, I think, in the field, and I always saw your emails and workshops. But what really caught my attention was you had used some sacred geometry in some of your logo, and then a really cool thing you would do is in your email, it was almost the text was purple, and so it would always stand out. And then I was like, I'm curious. This guy's doing some really interesting stuff with consciousness and hypnotherapy. So I reached out, and then we set a time on the books to meet up. And then I was busy closing Eternal Strength, going through this really emotional grieving process. But you were so awesome when I needed to cancel, just being like, dude, I completely understand. Go take your time. But then we got to have lunch finally once I was above ground and not drowning, and had an awesome lunch in Roswell. And I'm just grateful to have you on. I'd love for you to kind of tell the listeners a little bit about your journey, your story, and kind of what brought you to the work you're doing, and then we'll dive in.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's knowing the work you've done and the work that you continue to do. I mean, it's also very inspiring, and you've got a very soulful part of yourself. And so I'm attracted to that as a being, right? And there's a brotherhood, it feels like, from just our connections. And I always think it's interesting why and how we end up with somebody on our couch, or somebody that we meet, how we flow, how we blend. So there's something that's natural between you and I that feels very comfortable. So I wanted to say that first. It's it's not always that way, right? But where do I start with the journey? Where I started, so many different angles where I could just intuitively, I like to kind of free associate a little bit and not be too scripted. But I feel as though what I'm thinking today and feeling is, I grew up as an only child between my mom and dad, and not sure what, society thinks and has preconceived judgments about only children. We might be a little spoiled and entitled a little bit, but deep down underneath all that, we don't have siblings. And when you don't grow up with siblings, like, you don't have as many influences, maybe distractions. Maybe you're not modeling after them as much, right? So I think that there is a little invitation to kind of look inward and start processing for yourself a little bit. And there's a little more time with yourself. And I think having more time with yourself and Yeah, there could be times I wish I had a brother. I wish, I had a older brother, little brother is what I kind of wanted when I was a kid. My son's 5 now, so I can see that he's wishing he had one too. It's like, well, dude, just hang in there. It's going to get better. But I think when you have those moments of time by yourself, there's a couple different ways to look at it. You can either go outward and try to focus on everything outside of you, or you can go inward. And I think I was more of that type of person as a kid. So I think taking the time to play and feel and sense and get to know myself as a kid was definitely kind of an internal intuitive process. And I think with that too is that you start picking up, at least for me, I started picking up more of kind of the energy of things that were going on in the environment. What's it like in that school setting? What's it like at home? How the parents getting along? What's it like when dad's traveling, or is not there? How's mom feeling? There wasn't any really distractions of go play with your brother, go play with your sister. It was picking up all that information and absorbing it, and sometimes good, and sometimes the bad, and everything in between. And so, having that experience, I think being a little more internal, as connecting to myself, realizing that, I'm experiencing life through this way. And so, I became kind of attracted to kids, when I was even in elementary, middle school, the special ed kids. I could just sense and feel that they were off a little bit, or maybe the environment that they were in wasn't well, or maybe the kids that were mentoring them or the teachers mentoring them were stressed or upset. So I used to volunteer with kids with autism and kids that were in those special classes, and they would come and sit in our classes, and they would sit next to me. I would have a kid I would work with. So I started tuning into something. If I was certain calm and had that empathy, how relaxed they became, and how they started to smile, how their inner self started to show themselves. And I was just a kid, right? 10, 11, 12 years old, and going through life, middle school, high school, the funky times, right? Where all the stuff starts happening hormonally. I had some pretty heavy loss as a teenager. My best friend had passed away from cancer. And, watching and experiencing that for, several years was definitely something that, challenged me to connect with something deeper. I was feeling all kinds of things, right? And didn't really have a lot of support systems at the time as far as therapy, counseling, healing work, so to speak. I just don't think it was really known at the time. I'm not that old, but it was probably pretty amateur at that time. So I think, going through some grief, and there were several situations I went through grief at an early age, and then there was some bullying. And I think I always had a little bit of that eclectic, intuitive, different, highly sensitive type of kid. So I might have been easy to pick on, right? Because, I just stuck out a little different. I was creative, I was intelligent, but I was also highly sensitive, picking up all those signals. With all those hormones and those signals, it definitely put me in a spot that was, I would say, probably very anxiety provoking, overwhelming, probably even some depressive stuff at that time. So, fast forward a little bit to college, I was going to be pre-law, and then I wanted to go into biology, and I wanted to go into film and be the next, Quentin, Tarantino. And that didn't quite pan out. Those were some hard classes, and I don't think it was going to make where I wanted to be. And so it was an interesting journey. And I started taking psychology classes and humanities, and got introduced to a little bit deeper stuff. So I was kind of on my own journey of starting to figure out who I was. And it was just nice to get away from all those distractions from, your family at times, or, the societal factors, and delve into that. And my family did a good job of just letting me kind of find who I was. And I think in some of those humanity classes, I started getting into Eastern philosophy, reading things that were a little more esoteric. And growing up as a Catholic, that really resonated for me. It was like, this was different. I don't need to be shamed. I'm not in guilt. There's an internal journey that goes on. And it just opened up this door. And I was like, well, do I really want to go to school to be a philosopher and teach these things, or become a Buddhist, or practice Hindu kind of practices and Ayurvedic medicine? Um, I couldn't see that vision. I couldn't see that end goal. But I kept looking at these psychology classes, and I kept scoring really well, 99s and 100s in these classes. So after I changed my major 4 times, I thought, well, I'll just stick with this. I'm good at it. I had no idea where it was going to go. I thought it was just like a back door, maybe I'll come back to that at some point. Maybe that will work out for me. And so as I went through that process, I was scoring 99s and 100s, like I said, like on every class, I think, and being part of the psychology, psychi, where they call it National Institute, or, committee for people that have to have a 95 or above in your major in psychology. And I was at a 99, and I was like, well, I guess this will be the major. We'll just see where it goes from there. I had some growing up to do around 22, 23. And eventually I got a job working at the Marcus Institute, and it was working with kids with severe behaviors, a lot of autism, some other, pediatric feeding clinic I worked on with kids that couldn't really eat food, and they were G-tube dependent, and really working through a behavioral kind of modality, which is very 1950s and 60s and still present today in a lot of ways. But it was great training of what can we do through that lens of how can we really correct behaviors based on changing the reinforcement schedules and encouraging other things. And, after about 3 years of doing that, being a case manager, it was very rewarding seeing these kids actually change. There was one big kid I worked with. When he get upset, big kid, 6'4", 300 pounds. When he get upset, he'd bang his head against the wall. He'd tear his shirt, like Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, just with his thumbs. He would get so frustrated, and he couldn't talk. And, in over a year working with him, we got him to say almost like 60, 70 words, and his behaviors just decreased. He was able to connect. And that connection was kind of like, there's something here. If we can connect with these kids, we can connect with anybody. So I became a special ed teacher for a couple of years after that, and 2 years working in the school system. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's pretty intense. It's a hard job. It's every day, and the summer's off, like, doesn't feel like it. So you're working so hard in those, and so I have a lot of compassion for those folks. But I did see them a little jaded, and I saw things that took a while to change. And I think I was in a very creative, intuitive place where I wanted more sensory, more knowledge, more information, realized I could make changes in a classroom with kids. And, some of these kids were savants, and the way I could channel them and be stimulated by them it was a gift for both of us. They were teaching me the gift, right? They were teaching me how to tune into them. And I think that's where I started honing in on attunement. Really attuning to these kids and sensing them. They were perfect when I was in the room. When I leave, and things would go a little crazy. But as soon as I walk in, they sit down, they'd be right there. And, the paras have been doing it for 20, 30 years. They're like, we've never seen a teacher come in like that. I'm 24, 25 years old. And I'm like, well, don't ask me. I don't know what I'm doing. Had no idea what I was doing. I was just being, right. And so going off to grad school and I knew I wanted to be a counselor in some way, probably be in private practice in some way. And that really kind of evolved, taking the advanced postmaster's degree and focusing with Dr. Kenneth Matheny, who was teaching in his late 70s and 80s at that time. I remember taking a class on states of consciousness. It was at his house. There's like only 7 or 8 of us in this class, and he's teaching us everything. And talk about a sage. He was a vessel for like holding in so much knowledge and sharing it with us students. It's when we got into, I think Eckhart Tolle, and we started getting into a lot of the Eastern philosophies and in the healing and the Reikis and things that weren't taught in the clinical programs. Given that this guy created stress index exams and tests and assessments, was one of the most researched stress professors and in the world as far as like what he was looking at the molecular level. I mean, hard classes, his other classes, but this class was refreshing. This was like reminding me of those humanity days of taking all these art, creative philosophy classes. And so something really fit well. And I said, I'm taking this. I'm going to be moving in that direction. So that's kind of where that started. And really, it's just blossomed. And, I think early in my career, what training could I do? And it was mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive. And it was rapid resolution trauma certifications. And then I was moving into hypnotherapy certifications. And so I think I racked up 5, 6 certifications in 2 or 3 years, 4 years. Given, hypnotherapy is 1,000 hours, it's a long certification. So there's a part of me just catapulted, like I needed to have all these skills, but I wasn't really using and practicing them as much. So there was a point of just plateauing a little bit to digest, to marinate, and to let all that kind of really, create some angles and really just to digest. And so, yeah, there's always trainings that I move into the HeartMath Institute and doing their certifications, their trainings. And it's just wonderful how much knowledge is out there today that we didn't have 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And if we want to be in the field of clinical psychology, there's a lot of clinical stuff, but it's a little stale to me. You only get so far. The left brain to left brain, the cognitive side. This right brain is where all that emotion's at, right? It's where all this stuff that we got to massage out and get into. So I always find that the more tools I have, the more modalities that I have, then I can kind of really figure out for that person, where can I take that person? So yeah, it's definitely so many answers I could have given you, but it's
no, Bob,
the longest one.
It's beautiful. And I weave it back to the beginning where I visualize you. I get this vision of you as a young kid, and here you are, only child, like you said, no siblings, but you're deeply intuitive. And what nowadays the term empathic, a deep empath as a kid, and you're picking all of this up, but nobody's talking to you about any of that energy in the bioenergetic field, but you're feeling it from this very this internal compass as a kid. And then I just love your path where you mention some of the grief and loss that you experienced, and here you are, an adolescent, 14, 15, 16, losing your best friend is, I've told you I work with so many adolescents, and I think grief and loss during that time is profound.
Absolutely.
And but I think it can take you one of two ways. It can be a portal to growth and expansion, or it can really shut you down. And I see you as you kind of walked into this, like, okay, I'm going to walk through this period of my life. And then what I love is when you hit college, I was the same. I was like, anthropology, sociology, business. I went through all the majors, but then landed. But what I really like is your, Western psychology is so limited, but you were scoring really well, and you were probably really hungry for that. All right, let me study the psyche and the interior world and all of this. But then the beautiful blend that I think happened was your exposure to Eastern wisdom and contemplative practices and mindfulness based. And like you said, that's relatively new. I mean, the whole field of psychology is a baby if we really look at it, but your ability and courage to follow what was at your highest excitement, I think is oftentimes challenging to do. And so I commend you on that. I've told you I teach at certain universities, and I just met with a former student who's finishing a master's in clinical counseling, has loved the program, but is like, Dr. West, you're the first person that ever talked to me about the term transcontextual and Nora Bateman's work and ecologies of the mind. And I'm not getting any of that. Where can I go get more of that? And I think, for me, it's been all right, regardless of what the field is doing, yes, I have to have my CEUs as a licensed professional counselor and
Yep.
keep up my hours and certification, but I better go do something that entices me, feeds my soul. And so, like, I got really big into Carl Jung and the
Yeah.
Jung Society and unconscious and
Sure.
dream, but they would do some trainings. And then I was going to mention, what's beautiful is I also get that point where you were meeting with these special needs kids
Hmm.
and you were like, I don't know what I'm doing. You're 24, 25, but you're coming in. It's exactly like you mentioned in Eckhart's work,
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle, presence. And he
Yeah.
talks about it all the time. He says the greatest gift you can give another human is presence. But that requires you to be present in yourself and
Yeah.
your own energy. But when you do that, you become a teacher of presence. And I so many times I had another beautiful shout out to Dr. Neil Korobov, who's out at University of West Georgia. But at one point he said, look, if you're going to be a therapist, you're lending your clients your limbic system.
Yeah. It's true.
Wherever your energy is and what you're working on in your own growth, you can only take clients that far. And so it becomes this beautiful mirror, this quantum mirror of
Yeah.
life.
Absolutely.
I want to help somebody, but the way to really do that is to follow my truth, care for myself, and ground my energy in a way that can invite them to begin to do the same. And so I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, having a state of presence. I mean, yeah, Eckhart's got some work. There are a lot of mindful, abilities in his work. And there's, the Tao Te Ching is one of my favorites. I love Taoism. It's just it's rooted into the, rooting yourself into the seasons, right? It's putting yourself into nature. It's really understanding all those rhythms that are happening around you and trying to reflect them and be in harmony with them. And if we can spend more time, developing ourselves, then we'll have a deeper presence with anybody we're around. They'll feel it, they'll know it, they'll want to keep seeing us. You get that feeling from people, like you have a state of presence, you listen well, you're very present with them, you're hearing all of them, you're seeing all of them, right? And I think this state of presence really deals with like not reacting to some internal conflict, right? This ego that's trying to really, distract us from being present, right? It's a place of reactivity. It's a place of the ego feeds on pain, right? It feeds on criticism. It feeds on these really the dark side, right? This would be the shadow work of Carl Jung, right? It feeds on that. And if we can really work through the shadow and be in the shadow a lot more, then we can really feel it, sense it, tease it apart, maybe even recognize it a little bit more, observe it, right? Be more of a witness to it, and then bring ourselves back into our wisdom. And yeah, all this in milliseconds, right? So that we can pay attention that this is happening, so that we can tap into our wisdom, our sense of what is really in my best interest here and now. What's my soul asking me to do here? How do I really ground and root myself to be in my body in this place here and now? And so that allows us a place to then be able to listen to somebody, because we're sitting across from people and they can share some pretty horrific events in their life, right? And there's a time and place for when I allow those clients to share those things. I want to make sure they're in the right frame of mind, in the right place in their bodies and in their energy. But if we're not done enough work on ourselves, like, how triggering is that, and what does it bring up, and we might not agree or we might disagree, and all those things come up in those moments. And the more work we do on ourselves in those sessions, we show up a little bit better. But that's why it's so important for clinicians, people in general, to take time for themselves. If you're a parent, if you're in a relationship, if you have a job, you probably have some work to do to be a better self, right? You don't have to just be a counselor to be on this journey, to really get to know yourself a little bit better. But I know it helps me, and all areas of my life, to have a meditation practice, to have a yoga practice, to have a Tai Chi practice, to do energy work, and, to be able to clear things so that I can be a better person just for myself. I'm clearer. And that allows me to be more present with me so I can be more present with others. To really pulling all those layers out, teasing it can take hours of work just in a week to be able to show up for somebody. Right. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it takes a lot of
And
work. The state of presence is great.
yeah, and Bob, I want to get into some of what you just touched on, some of your practices and some other connection. But yeah, it makes me think a lot. I absolutely adore Ram Dass, and I talk about
Yeah.
him all the time. And for anybody that doesn't know, Richard Alpert, he was part of the
Yeah.
Harvard psychology department in the 60s, 70s. But some of his talks, when he talks about sitting with another human and doing counseling work or healing work, he'll say the goal is to be able to hear somebody's story
Hmm.
and not get enraptured by it, not
Right.
believe every part of the story, because it is a story. And when you initially hear that, for somebody, they may be like, wait, you got to understand my truth. But what you just touched upon is the ego,
Yeah.
and this idea that the ego is really sneaky.
Hmm.
And the
Yeah.
more you try to get rid of it, fight
Oh yeah.
with it, eradicate it, it finds little sneaky back doors where it'll come in and convince you that it's not your ego. But if you can recognize whatever story you're telling yourself and about the world is
Yeah.
usually not absolute truth. It's
Right.
usually your experience. And I like the differentiation between this idea that we all have a personal history, we all
Yeah.
have a personal narrative and a personal story, but there's a bigger truth at hand. And this is where we step into consciousness and
Yeah.
embodiment and what I like to call our deep interwoven connection to divine source and spirit and
Yeah.
consciousness that we're all a part of. And
Yeah.
I like so much of my growth and my study has been in a book called A Course in Miracles.
Oh yeah.
And I love it. I love it. But it really starts to talk about, it says, look, the ego, it operates in duality, and
Hmm.
it wants to make things separate. It wants
Right.
to say, it always loves to separate. And spirit, if we're really talking about like a non-dual consciousness, is trying to get us to recognize that nothing is separate. And
Right.
so a simple way to look at it would be the ocean. If we call the ocean consciousness,
Hmm.
I like to think about human beings being born, and we're this drop of water or this crest or this wave that's coming out of the ocean, and
Hmm.
we're taking this huge journey, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, and we completely forget that we're tethered to the ocean and we can never leave it. The wave can never break away from the ocean, but
Right.
while we're on that journey as a human, we're like, there's no way I'm part of the ocean. I'm over here. I'm Dr. West, and I'm this, and I'm riding this journey of being a human and human experience. But it's like when we die, it's just the wave crashing. It's going
Yeah.
back into the ocean that we've never left. We've never been separate from. We've always been a part of.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that can scare the shit out of people, to
Oh
be
yeah.
honest. I know for me,
Sure.
and definitely for the ego. I'm like,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about death and attachment and all the ways that we function as an ego identity. But it's beautiful, because all of those Eastern practices that you talk about, whether it's breath work, Tai
Yeah.
Chi, yoga, when they are at their best,
Mhm.
they're trying to pull you to that spiritual connectivity and holistic engagement. And then of course, the ego will be like, well, let's turn it into a business. And it's
Right.
or whatever, or it will tell you this person's the guru and this person isn't.
Right.
And I love Ram Dass when he talks about it. He goes, look, if you listen still enough, everybody's the guru.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I think it's lost in the interpretations. The interpretations is what really I mean, I kind of think of it in a lot of different ways. I mean, everything exists. All truths are all true. Everything's also false. But I mean, we are so limited in our human body form of being able to even understand the different dimensions that exist in the world, right? In space, beyond space and time, beyond the fourth dimension. Like, we're so limited, and we have to be conscious that we're limited and that we're not going to fully understand it. And I think that we have to recognize that our information that we do interpret is all biased, right? It's all biased. It's a partial truth of what's really experienced, because we just don't have the ability consciously to really understand how the universe is really interconnected. Our cones and rods and just our vision, we see what, like one hundredth of what a certain animals see, and we see things that are just really a reflection of photons, that are constructs that we have been taught over time. That I see that tree, and that tree is physical. I can touch it. I know it's what we've been taught. Nothing is physical. Matter is less than 1% of the universe, right? And the things that we do see that are physical are made of energy. And it's just, I mean, it's just one of those things that we've got all these electrons and subatomic particles inside of that tree that are just little mini vortexes of energy that are kind of like reflecting each other, mirroring each other. They're the same amount of distance away from each other, but they're picking up the signals at the same time. And it's automatic, simultaneously entangled with each other. And, we look at that distance inside of a tree, and maybe it's a smaller tree, but if we really were to measure the distance of those subatomic particles, it would be miles in our metrics. And so when we really look at energy, I mean, everything is entangled. Everything is working with something. It's all being influenced. And so I like to think of it almost like in the cosmic, really looking at the deeper universe, that everything is communicating. And there's some spectrographs out there, and radars that they use, where you can see the dark energy all just woven, and everything is interconnected. Everything's all one in some way, in this beautiful way. And then we look at the earth, and how the earth is being affected by the moon and the tides, and the beauty of the moon and women on this planet. And they go through this cycle of being able to bring life and to be ready for it every month. Like, that's a pretty intuitive, deep thing to me. The sun bringing this beautiful life to us, right? And creating all this energy around us. Here we are, spinning 1,000 miles per hour on our axis, trying to keep up with the sun. The sun is also flying way through the cosmos as well, and we're trying to keep up with it. And there's all this energy that's going on, so we're never really the same every day, every week, every season. It's constantly changing, and everything is all integrated. So we kind of bring it down to living beings, and the ionosphere connected, and everything underneath it. And the animals are so deeply connected with each other. The ecology of how some of these animals are communicating with each other and getting along with each other and sharing. It's beautiful, right? You have all these apex predators, but you got some animals in Africa that the zebras eat the front half of the grass, so the other antelopes and other things can eat the bottom half. Like, it's just interesting how they all work together in that way, right?
Absolutely.
And then you've got all this beautiful tree systems and how they communicate through their root systems. And I think it's interesting. This all kind of comes back. I'll bring it back, I promise. But
no, I'm right there with you.
Trees are interesting. I mean, their root systems, when you have two trees next to each other, we always think that they're competing for sunlight. Who's going to get to the canopy and who's going to reach it? But they work together. And if there's a tree next to you and he's struggling or she's struggling, it's struggling in some way, I'm going to send a little bit of glucose through my root systems to that one just to give it a little extra boost. Come on, buddy. We want to share that. So the trees are very interesting how they are working together. And there's some research out there in trees, and it's that they can pick up signals from the coniferous and deciduous trees, that they're picking up signals up to 100, 200 miles away of knowing when the pollen's coming, when the season's coming. They're communicated through that beautiful framework of stuff underneath the surface that we don't even recognize. There's an energy with the earth, right? It's got its own heartbeat. It's got its own consciousness. And, the fungi underneath there is this beautiful creation as well, and how it's bringing everything together. And I'm not a mycologist, but man, it's pretty amazing what's happening in that whole world. And then you got humans. We're here, and we're not playing in a way that life has been playing and the way that the stars have been playing. But what's very interesting is that we're highly influencing the earth. We're highly influenced and entangled with each other. Every central nervous system is picking up the signal of a central nervous system around them, where that's through the vagus nerve and through the vibrations, the energy field is picking it up, and it's affecting all the way through our heart rhythms to affecting our breathing. That's changing our brain structure. It's changing the frequency and what state we're in, right? So literally human beings don't recognize, but if they are trained enough and intuitive enough, they will know. And that's part of the work, I think, is what I try to bring people into, is attuning deeper into yourself and starting to calm the system down to be more connected, so that we are putting out an energy that's affecting each other in the best way we can, right? And if we're affecting people in this way, in a place of compassion or care and love, then we're not just changing the way that person feels, we're changing the way that person thinks. So, the brain is getting signals from the heart through the heart rate variability, and the brain is taking in this information, and it is going to create thoughts based on interpretation of what it's feeling. And then it sends a signal down to every cell in the body. So if it's negative, we are eventually going to create very negative types of thinking patterns. We're going to eventually create cancers and disease and illnesses. So it is this process of recognizing that, how responsible are we? How much of a duty is the human species really looking at to see, how am I affecting my community, my family, my country, my world, my planet? How am I affecting the planet? We've seen the increase in the uptick of tsunamis and earthquakes and fires, and it's the earth she's not happy. She's not happy with us. We could be better. We could be living in more harmony. We're very greedy, and we're very selfish, and we're very much capitalists as a country, not just a country, but as a world. And we have to be better at recognizing that this is beyond just working through our anxieties and working through our depressions. It's living in harmony with all of Earth.
Beautifully said. And Bob, I'm sitting here as you walk through it. There was an incredible book. I think it was called The Book of Symbols. And I had it back in the day. I ended up passing it on to somebody else, but it had the book broken up with all different like archetypes and symbols, but it had the book broken into the plant world, the spirit world, the human world, and the cosmos. And so it was this really interesting kind of interwoven thing, but it made me think as you were talking, which you so beautifully did, and kind of took us into this ecologically rich cosmic connection. It's like so many people, what I see, and this is myself included, and I've been in this space, and sometimes I still fall in this space. It's like we're under hypnosis, by culture and society to go, yeah, all that stuff's cool, but I gotta go to work and I gotta pay the freaking phone bill, and my wife's tripping out because of this, and I'm worried about my kid because of this. And it's like how quickly we will take the experience of being alive and being in awe and wonder, this magnificent dance that we are doing all the time, and bring it to this very closed down. And I have a lot of empathy for it, because it's like, I feel like culture, we're not given it when we're little. We're not shown that as kids. We're put through this kind of machinist system that is very scientific reductionism, that goes, look, if you're talking about something that we can't measure, it doesn't exist. And not wanting to go into that. But I think it is absolutely due time for humanity. We're so ripe to begin waking up and stepping into this conscious awareness, where it's like, but the first thing we got to do is break the spell. The Monday through Friday, work, eat, sleep, like grind. There's another beautiful video. I don't know if you know the artist Gautier. I'll put a link. He's got a great video called what's the name of the song? But it's this really cool animated video, and it's just a dude going to an office every day and just doing the same thing, and then he starts slamming his head on a typewriter, and it's just like, but honestly, if you're out there and you're listening and you are struggling, it's letting people know you are a beautiful, magnificent being that is connected to all nature, and there is an aliveness in your life. And I think it's not about learning anything new or adding anything to you. It's a clearing. It's getting rid of all the bullshit that stands between you and your connection to yourself and your connection to love. And the way I like to break it down for the young people I work with, man, is like, we'll be sitting in my office and we'll be talking about stuff, and I'll be like, look, to be honest with you, all of us would be dead if there were no trees and no bees. Like if it went, and it's this really intense head trip where you start to go, wait a minute, maybe the ego part of me is not this all important thing that I need to worship. Maybe there is something much deeper that I am a part of. And when you keep going to those layers of nature and spirit, you start to kind of see. And then one other thing I'll say real quick, Ram Dass talks about it beautifully. Speaking of trees, and he says, look, when I go out in nature and I'm around all the trees, I appreciate them. I look at the small ones, the big ones, the medium. I see that this one's bent this way and trying to get sun. And I have this profound appreciation. And then he says, then I get done hiking and I come back around people. And he says, it all goes out the window, and here comes the judging mind. You're too this, you're too that. You need to change this. Pissed off, upset, hurt. And he says, so my practice for my entire journey on this earth will be turning people into trees and trying to appreciate their beauty, what soil they grew in, why they may be crooked in a certain way or straight in another, and but have a more appreciation and thoughtfulness than judgment. And so I think it's beautiful. And I know you're a bit time limited, so I know we got a
little bit. We're okay.
Okay.
We go a little longer. Cool. Let's see what we can do. But I think, just to piggyback off that, if we could just learn from the trees, and HeartMath Institute's a great program. I've done a lot of training through them over the years, and part of my work that I do for myself, but also with clients as well, and part of the workshops that I run is really helping people to get into more of an alpha state, right? When we can get into an alpha state, we can breathe. We're changing the structure of the brain. We're getting into. And
just so, let me interject, just so people aren't out there thinking that you're trying to get them to be more like Andrew Tate or alpha male. Maybe you can explain what you mean with alpha state. This isn't like a dominate the world, become the new alpha male with Poynter. This is a different alpha state.
We're not flexing here. Maybe after we do the work, we can flex inside internally. No, I mean, we got all these different brain waves. We got 5 major brain waves. I mean, the gamma state is a really beautiful brain wave. It's 30 to 100 hertz, right? It's a very fast pace. It moves 40 times from the front to the back of the brain per second. This is what your Tibetan monks can access, just on demand, right? They can be in sub-zero weather, and they can regulate the same body temperature. The heart rate variability is increasing, and they can, disrobe and be in the snow and still maintain body temperature for up to 2 hours. Powerful. Like, we live in a secular world, so I don't know if we can just do that, right? But if we can borrow from them and try to weave it into our weeks, our Monday through Fridays as well, then we'll be better off people, right? Beta state is going to be underneath that, so 12 to 30 hertz. I think a beta is busy as a bee, so it's kind of like a stress response. That's usually sympathetic nervous system is more activated. If we're in a beta state for too long, people that show up with a lot of anxiety or OCDs or even PTSD, the hypervigilance, we're going to see a lot of beta activity. An alpha state is going to be 8 to 12 hertz. So when you're in that state, you're in this beautiful sine wave, right? It's nice and pretty, whereas beta is going to be really up and down and very peaks and valleys. And so an alpha state is kind of like the doorway into the subconscious. It slows everything down. Theta state is going to be 4 to 8 hertz. So it's even slower. This is a place where people normally experience right when they wake up, right when they fall asleep, unless they have a deep practice of working with themselves. Delta is going to be 0 to 4 hertz. So this is something you'll experience in very deep meditative states and also in dream sleep. And so, as kids, everything that happens in our lives, I think there's up to like 4, 5, 6 years old, is embedded into a theta state. Our brain is not active enough to get into alpha and into those beta states at that time. So whatever happens in your life, what happens in your family, what's happening those first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you're in a theta state. So it's like that coding gets in there. It gets programmed in that theta state. So as we become teenagers and adults, and whatever that might look like, right, our behaviors sometimes are the same. Our subconscious is processing 40 million bits per second, where your conscious mind is producing 40 bits per second. So our subconscious is 40 million times stronger. So when we're doing talk therapy, we're only going so far, right? So helping people change their brain waves to get into an alpha state allows us to sink into some of those programs. If we get alpha state a little bit more, I mean, that's a homeostatic capacity at that point. We're in more equilibrium, we're getting more balanced. Our cellular body is happier. It's not in a threat, it's not in a fight or flight. Our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, which all the vagus toning starts to happen, right? 70% of your immune system is in your gut. 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. So all of a sudden, we're going to feel happier just by doing breath work. So getting into an alpha state is pretty important. And it allows for possibilities to go into theta states in time. Some people, we have to titrate and, see what that feels like they feel like they're losing control, or maybe certain visions start to come up. So we have to just kind of, attune and pay attention, right? And see what's really happening with that person and for ourselves, right? And I'm not telling people to go do this right now, right? I'd say work with somebody that's very seasoned and very experienced at what they're doing. And so once we get into that state, then it opens us up to activate our heart. And we can activate our heart through beautiful processes of just focusing on the heart, breathing in the heart, and then eventually activating some emotions that can be very supportive of the heart. And as we get into those emotions, they're usually in the love spectrum. We don't use the word love because a lot of people have heartbreak with love. So they're not able to access love. I don't love anybody. Yeah, they push everything away based on the frequency of what they've experienced in their life, right? What's that subconscious? So we look at the spectrum: care and gratitude, appreciation, compassion, self-compassion, kindness, patience. There's a lot of things that we can fit into that spectrum. Those are the major pillars, I would say. And as we start to activate the heart to feel those things, then your heart is sending more information to your brain than your brain is sending to your heart. Right, 60 times more electrical than the brain. It's 100 times more magnetic in the magnetic field, the bioelectromagnetic field in the brain. It's the only organ in the body that we know that can function independently and interdependently with the brain. And through the vagus nerve, it's communicating, it's signaling. So if the heart is in a high coherence, which means we're practicing, I care about myself, I care about others, we're activating those emotions, then the brain is starting to pick up those signaling. And we know through the EEGs and the EKGs that the brain is a few milliseconds behind the rhythm of the brain. I'm sorry, the rhythm of the heart. So whatever the heart is doing, the brain is going to copy that. And so we want to, it's less about changing the way you think. It's more about changing the way you feel deep in the heart, because that's going to change the way you think. When we're around people, and if I have a coherent, high coherence heart rate variability in my heart, I'm going to influence not just the person in front of me and the way that they're feeling, but I'm changing the way they think. And if I'm in a low coherence and I'm in a negative space, and we all know what that can feel like, that's a bad vibe. It doesn't feel good. And all of a sudden we start thinking the same way. We start being angry or fearful. So when we get into this state and really activate it, we're not just putting out we're not just creating an energy in our brains and our cellular body, which is very healthy. We're creating an energy outside of our bodies. And it's pushing that energy out, which is eventually going to put us a little bit more in harmony with the people we're around, our loved ones, right? The planet, the trees, back to that thing, and to give into that way. And I find it very, very interesting that we can work from the inside out. We can work on slowing the breath down. We can get into that space. And then eventually we can start activating that bioelectromagnetic field more. We can start to feel it and sense the chi and expand it and grow it and build up that force field like the ionosphere of the earth, right? We're all like little fractals of everything going on in the cosmos, right? We're all the same pieces, the same thing, all the way down to the subatomic particle. It's the same thing. So if we could just use that knowledge that we have, and when we get into that space and we're in that vibrant place, I mean, talk about the quantum field, we're connecting to information. You have more access at that point, right? And all those atoms and particles are activating at the same time. And so we're entangled. All of our nervous systems, the planet, the plants, the animals, the quantum change is really like a change in the way we perceive things. And then all of a sudden we start having a different experience. And so I think when we get into this state and we can practice being in this state more, we just have more access to information. We have more regulation. We don't see addictions in that state. We don't have anxieties. We don't have fears. You don't have depression. It's neurobiologically impossible at that point, right?
Yeah.
And neurobiologically, bioelectromagnetically impossible. It just doesn't happen. Now we might kind of go back and forth sometimes. So on some level, it's changing the energy, what's going on in the body, but it's also what energy you're putting out and what energies can you eventually clear that you've picked up in that soulful journey too, which gets into past lives and ancestral traumas and things that we've carried on. So I believe like in this life form, I call it almost like the earth body, right? It's our 3D form of how it's manifested now, that our life form body in this state is going to be chasing after survival. So what's underlining all those other symptoms? We're just trying, our vagus nerve, our neuroceptions are trying to find safety. We just want to feel safe. We want to make sure everything's okay. We worry about the bills. We worry about how many clients are on our schedule. We worry about, if my car has too much pollen on it, or, or what pair of shoes I'm going to get next, or, the guy cutting the grass didn't do a great job. I mean, all these silly things that we're looking for safety. And if we can tap into our soul body more, which is our energetic body, our bioelectromagnetic field is our spirit, it's our energy body. And that's what we're kind of showing and illuminating now. But our soul is everything that's come before. It's our deeper wisdom. It has all that knowledge. If we can just tap into that more through techniques and training and exposure to it, and allowing those neurons to fire and get wired to be more connected to that, we become this more conscious self, that when we have this physical human body form, this 3D body going through something, we can observe it and see that, oh, yeah, going through that again, getting a little upset, yeah, there's that rage inside there. Wonder where you got that from, where you experienced that in your past lives and in your early life, whatever that might be. And it's like, okay, I'm aware that I'm feeling that. I don't have to be that, right? It gives us a place to pivot and navigate somewhere else. So that takes the practice, right? That's the practice of, I think, where we should be in this life, right? And where to find more meaning in this life is do all this great work that you have infinite amount of room to grow. We all do. And that gives us this access to be this better self, feel better, get away from those symptoms, be more conscious, be more aware, access more knowledge, more information, and share that love and everything with everyone around us.
Beautiful, Bob. I mean, talk about a mic drop, brother. That was incredible. And I think, the important piece is, for anybody listening, wherever you're at, this is what I like to say, wherever you're at, whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing now, all of this is accessible to you. And that's the day and age that we live in now, where it's like, even if you can't get a hold of a therapist, even if you can't get a hold of a Tai Chi practitioner,
right,
a sage, breath work, there is so much availability to go look at these things. So I'm going to put links below, like HeartMath, and everything that you're talking about. And then I imagine somebody who's in the car right now and listening to this and just going, okay, what's the first step? How do I even take, and I imagine them being able to pull over, park the car somewhere, and turn the car off and just take a minute to close your eyes, put your hand over your heart, and breathe.
That's it.
And that for me is the first entry point. And what I like to tell clients, because they'll be like, Wes, I forget all this stuff, dude. Breath work, there's box breathing, there's 4, 6, 8, 3, 6, 9. And I'm like, look, just remember this. If your out breath is longer, your exhale is longer than your inhale, you're calming your system. And we can talk about it in the fancy ways. You're moving from sympathetic to parasympathetic. But if you're having a panic attack, if you're overwhelmed, just throw a hand on a heart, close your eyes. Big breath in through your nose, slow it down, and then a really long exhale.
Long exhale. You hit that right on the head. I mean, that's definitely part of getting into the alpha state, and if we're in an alpha state, we're actually in tune to the Schumann effect. The Schumann effect is the ionosphere, the magnetic field of the Earth's frequency is 7.83. So it puts us in that almost 8 hertz. So it's like we're deeply connected to that. And it's also interesting when we connect and the heart rate variability and connecting to the heart, when we measure it and we look at it through the M waves and some of the gadgets that HeartMath sells, and they're great to play with and to increase that heart rate variability. When we're in a higher coherence, it gets into 0.1 hertz. And 0.1 hertz is a very slow frequency. But what's very interesting is that the core of the Earth, I think it's called a geological climate zone. That's from Greg Braden. Did a training with him years ago. Great scientist that embodies kind of like, what Bruce Lipton's into, and, these greats that have really inspired our healing. That in that geological climate zone, when it's measured, it's at 0.1 hertz. So here it is when we connect our brain, our heart, we're connecting to the core of the Earth. That's really grounding to me, right?
Absolutely.
That's grounding. So
I don't know if you can get much more grounded than that, man.
Well, I mean, we're all space dust, right? We're just stardust, and we just have to kind of, we got to connect it. We're not using our higher brain. We're not using our neocortex. I won't go too far into it, but the human chromosome 2, is one of the pairs that fused together. Right, we're the only species with the number of pairs of chromosomes that we have at 23, right, 46 chromosomes. But that human chromosome 2 was 2 of them that fused together. So the telomeres were in the middle, and eventually they became at the ends. And so that human chromosome 2, when we look at, like, you can read genetics, you can read, like, the human genome, and we get into, like, when did that happen? And it happened 200,000 years ago. And the Homo sapiens, we didn't come from Neanderthals. We didn't come from anybody else, right? We just showed up at that time. Something happened. Something was intentional. Something was bringing us into a place of being illuminated, right? And I just think it's just, yeah, probably some advanced civilizations were tapped into it because they had less distractions, less dopamine going in and out of different ways, maybe less cataclysmic stuff going on.
They didn't have TikTok.
I don't even know what that is besides the clock ticking, but no, I hear what you're saying.
Or Instagram or social media.
Social media, yeah.
They didn't have YouTube videos.
But I think that's kind of like where our species is moving into. If we come into the state of healing, we're activating and really awakening up to a really high level of consciousness. We have this ability, and I don't have all the answers. I keep learning every day, every week. And, I just have a little bit of what steps to take, right? And how do we start going there? Because it's infinite. It's infinite how far we can go.
Absolutely. And Bob, I'm incredibly grateful. We're going to, as long as I can pin you down for another time at some point, I would love to do a second episode, because I think people are going to be hungry to hear so much of what you've just kind of scratched the surface on. But when we're talking about bioenergetic field, the soul body, past lives, ancestral trauma, I think that's a whole other piece that we can dive into. But I want to thank you for today in a huge way, for being able to come on and share. And then for anybody that is out there that wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to contact? I'll put your link to your website.
That's probably best. Yeah, come through my website. There's a spot on the website where you can contact me. That'll email me, and we go from there. Start the conversation and see what we can do to assist each other. Because I believe it's a collaboration of healing. It's not just the expert doing all the work. It's people give me the information, and then we see what fits and we work from there.
Absolutely. And and I'll put links to that, and then some of your workshops as well. But Bob, I'm just incredibly grateful for your time. Thank you for coming on Conversations with Dr. Wes.
Thank you, Wes. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.